All right. So, as I have mentioned, JavaScript is a programming language that brings web pages to life. Now, HTML and CSS, the HTML bit structures the page. You can just create like a skeleton. And then CSS styles the same page. So you sort of give that page beauty. Now, JavaScript brings in animation into the page. Think of things like dynamic content, animations, interactive things. You click a button, it does some action, and so on and so forth. All that is the thing brought about by JavaScript. And again, as I have mentioned, CSS and HTML are still necessary because you have to create a skeleton, you have to give the page a skin, and then now you bring in the aspect of uh, being dynamic. Now, so let's talk about a little bit of why JavaScript is so popular. Now, the reason why JavaScript is popular is first of all, it powers most, or it's one of the core technologies of web development. Most web pages will have JavaScript at some point. So that is why JavaScript is like uh, is if you're doing web development, you cannot miss JavaScript at some point. Then, about why it's popular, one of the reasons why JavaScript is popular is because it's platform independent. Now, what do I mean by it being platform independent? This means it can be able to work on your Android, on your iOS, on your browser, and you can also use it to create to program robots and so on and so forth. So it really doesn't matter what platform you use; it's most likely is going to run on the platform. Now, we'll see about things that JavaScript is capable of and what you can also do to add more power to it. Another reason why JavaScript is also popular is because like it's very flexible. By it being flexible, I mean you can be able to run it on your client. So in most cases, when we mention client, we refer to the end user devices. That is your mobile phone or your laptop and so on and so forth. And then it is also possible to run JavaScript on a server. Now, a server is basically some powerful machine where you query your content and so on and so forth. So, in most servers, JavaScript runs using something called Node.js, and you have already installed Node.js. And we'll also be seeing how we can use JavaScript or Node.js without necessarily depending on like a browser. Then another core reason why it's also popular is because it's very easy to learn. Unlike some other programming languages, JavaScript is like way easy to learn because it has something called a simple syntax. We'll be seeing what syntax is. Um, and it is also developer friendly. So I usually tell people JavaScript is sort of like English on steroids. So it just looks like English, only that you add a few things here and there. And then it has like a rich ecosystem of libraries and frameworks. So this means we have some pieces of code pre-created by other people. So if you think of creating something as complex as, turning on Bluetooth on your laptop, there is probably a library that you can just install and then start using with your code to make that possible. And also, if you're stuck with some JavaScript, error or issue, you probably search it up on Google. You'll find someone else found it and fixed it, and they have like a write-up on how they fixed it. So, like, that is what we mean by it has a rich ecosystem. And it also has things called frameworks that help you create an app from scratch way easily. Now, other than it being popular and so on and so forth, it comes with its own perks. Okay, so the perks are not as major, but it's worth mentioning them. Now, one of the disadvantages of having JavaScript is because of something called compatibility. Now, in very old browsers, and by very I mean like very old browsers, JavaScript might not be able to run on them. Like this is the sort of Netscape. I believe most of you probably never heard of such a name like Netscape. And for modern browsers like Chrome and Firefox and Brave, a few older versions might have features that have not been implemented in them. So that means if you're using the latest version of Chrome, you might be running features that you're going to see, like things called fat arrow functions. But for older versions, you might not be able to run such because those functionalities haven't been implemented. Another disadvantage of having JavaScript is something called client-side dependency. Now, this means if your browser is very, very slow, or if your machine is very slow in general, also you running JavaScript on that machine is going to be slow. So it is directly dependent on the end user's component. So it might be slow on your machine and it might be faster on someone else's machine if their machine is powerful. Another disadvantage is essentially because JavaScript runs on the end user, and by the end user I mean the machine of the person, maybe viewing your page and so on and so forth. If you create horrible code that has bugs, it is going to directly affect the end user using the code on your app. So that means if we have people knowledgeable enough, we usually call them hackers. They might be able to steal things like sensitive credentials, like I mean cookies and sessions and so on and so forth. But for now, you don't have to be worried about that. I'll be teaching you like secure coding practices so that your code is foolproof. And that's it on most of the advantages and disadvantages of JavaScript. Of course, there is more, but I mean, let's just have a look at that. Now, let's see what I mentioned, something called a syntax. For you to understand a programming language, you need to understand something called a syntax. And syntax is basically the rules governing how you should write code and so on and so forth. For instance, in JavaScript, your code, like each and every reasonable line of code, the way we have sentences ending with a full stop, in programming, and specifically JavaScript, uh, the end of your line of code should be like a semicolon. Now, this is not mandatory, it's usually optional, but for best coding practices, always make sure like each line of reasonable code ends with a semicolon. Now, this line of code that we have here, that's something pretty basic. You don't need to understand at this point. You don't need to understand what console.log means and all this stuff. Just know when we run this code, wherever we're going to run it, it's going to print back hello from JavaScript. So it's basically some like an echo. We give it something and then it gives us back the same thing. So the code that is or the thing that is between these two speech marks is what is going to be printed back to us. We'll see this in action, so don't worry much about the whole of this. Then we have things we call comments. Now, comments, think of it in this way. At some point, you will have some code that will be very lengthy, and it's in human nature to forget things. So you might write your code right now, and then maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, you come back and you don't understand what is happening. So that's why it's essential to have comments. And basically, comments are what they mean in English. Just some English, statements to help you understand what that piece of code is doing. So maybe you can write something like this is printing something out, or this is doing something. And we have two types of comments. We have a single line comment. You just add 2 slashes and then your comment. And then for multiple line comments, you add a forward slash, asterisk, the comment, and then asterisk, and then the closing uh, bar like that. So basically, these will not be executed by your computer. They are solely for you as the programmer to sort of understand what the code is doing. And this is not only helpful for you, it's also helpful for other people, assuming you're creating some code in which multiple people are going to contribute on. So always make sure you have comments in your code for those reasons. Right. Then we have
Charlie, just a question, eh? I think I know what a single line comment is, but this is a multi-line comment. What does it mean? That is it more than one statement you're writing in it, or what is it?
Yes, it's basically that. So think of it as this. You might have a very short and brief description, like maybe this code prints something, and at some point you might have like a paragraph of an explanation. This code takes in something, and then it starts this and that and that. So for such lengthy explanations, they might not fit on a single line. So you need to use this sort of format in JavaScript to make sure like you have all that captured. Does that answer your question? Ali?
Yes, we are good now.
Awesome. Now, we also have things called variables, and variables are basically things used to store data. So think of these as containers, and we'll see the whole thing around this. For now, just know we have something called a variable. It looks like this. We will get into dissecting what this means, and so on and so forth. So just know we have things called variables. Now, let me just rewind back to 3 steps. So we've mentioned we have something called a syntax that is basically a bunch of rules that governs how you should write code. So in English, this might be maybe, I don't know what I can compare it with it in English. In typical English, there is a line like this. English line makes sense, basic JavaScript syntax. But when you bring this to the start, like maybe syntax basic JavaScript, it doesn't make any English sense. So it's the same thing for code. If you bring this at the beginning of this line, it will probably not make sense to the computer. But when you have it moving in this way, it will make sense. So that is what we basically call syntax. And it also dictates, like in English, when you're starting a name, it should have like a capital letter. So in programming, we have something like, that dictates what you should do and when you should do it, so on and so forth. Then we've mentioned we have things called comments, and these are basically notes for you or other people. And we've also mentioned we have things called variables, basically storing data. Now, let's now start doing some more practical stuff and see how we can run JavaScript in a browser console. So we all know what the browser is, but we don't know what a console is. Now, let me show you what all that is. So I'm going to open a new tab, and we have a fresh browser window. So we have something called a console, and when you're developing with JavaScript, you'll be using this a lot. To open the console in any browser, be it Brave, Firefox, Safari, and so on and so forth, you just right click anywhere on your page. So just right click, and then you'll see something to do with inspect. So right click anywhere, and then you click on inspect, and then some thing will pop up. It might pop up on the left, on the right, or at the bottom, and so on and so forth. So this is a preference. I like it at the bottom because I am able to sort of do things as I see what is happening. So if you want to change the location of this thing, you can click on the 3 dots towards the right, and then dock to the right, or maybe dock to the left, and so on and so forth. But I like it at the bottom. I like it at the bottom like that. So the console is basically this thing. All right. So when you open this thing using the method that I've shown, you'll see things. You have inspector, we have console, debugger, network, and so on and so forth. We'll essentially be dealing mostly with this console part. All right. So I might also show you some of the other things that you might see some things on. So when you click on network, this shows you what the page is communicating to and so on and so forth. But we won't be using this mostly. We'll be using the console. But I mean, it's nice for you to explore the other things and see what they do and so on and so forth. So I have shown you one of the ways of opening the console, which is right clicking anyhow on the page and then clicking on inspect, and then you will get the console. Another way is by using shortcuts. So depending on how your keyboard layout is like, if you just press on F12, it pops up the console. Okay, so I mean, this sort of at times comes with the muscle memory. If you do this long enough, you don't. You see, if I want to open the console using the browser, I have to right click, open, inspect, and then move. But when I want to do it faster, I can just click on F12 and then it just pops it up. So that is also an option. For some computers, clicking F12 is not sufficient. So you have to click on maybe function and then F12. But again, this is just extra information. So long as you know how to do it using the right click and then inspect and then console, you're good to go. On Mac, I think on Mac you have to press on, I think, command and then F12, if I'm not wrong. So this is what we call the console. And we'll be seeing how we can run JavaScript on it. So let's do this actually practically. Let's run some piece of JavaScript code on this console. So I'll expand it a little bit and maybe zoom out so that you can see. Zoom out a little bit. And then I'm going to retype the line of code that we had in our slide. So we had something like console.log. And then we had something like, I think it was hello from JavaScript. We had something of this sort. And then at the end, we had a semicolon. So basically, this is supposed to be console, not console. Console. So basically, anything you type on the console that is valid JavaScript gets executed. So hold on. I don't know where my cursor went. Weird. But if I just press enter on this, it should be able to print back whatever is in the speech marks. Basically, if we just press enter, whatever was in between these speech marks gets printed back to us. So what this line of code does is whatever is inside the speech marks gets printed back to us. So yeah, I've mentioned that I will be explaining the commands that I'm typing as I do so. So at this point, I think I'm at the home. So I need to go to desktop. And let me just list to see if I can be able to see desktop. Do I see desktop? Desktop at this point. Should be able to see it. Yeah. So long as when I run the ls command, which basically means list, if I'm able to see a folder or a file, that means I can be able to interact with it. So I'm just going to cd, which means change directory, and change it into desktop. So you can see I have successfully moved inside desktop. Let me list again to see what is inside desktop. I have all these things, and I'm basically going to create a folder called JavaScript class. And this is the folder that we'll be using to store all our code and so on and so forth. So I'm going to use the mkdir command, mkdir, and then JavaScript class. So at this point, if I've lost you, you don't have to worry about all this. Maybe you covered it in the previous intro class, but I mean, it's just nice to know or nice to have. So right now I'm inside JavaScript class, and this is where we'll be writing all our code. Right now it's empty. I'm just going to create a folder and maybe just call it intro. So create a folder and call it intro. and I'm going to get inside that intro folder, and I'm going to open VS Code in that folder. So right now I have VS Code open inside this intro folder, and the intro folder is basically empty. So I'm going to track the orders. This intro folder is empty. And we are going to just create a HTML file. You can just call it index.html like that. And I think I should zoom out a little bit, something like that, and maybe reduce that to there. So the index.html is basically empty at this point. Now, after opening this index.html, I think I can show you this. There is a shortcut called emmet, where you just type the exclamation code, and then when you press enter, it creates for you like a basic HTML structure. So let me do it again. Type exclamation code, and then I press enter. Then you can see it generates for me like a basic HTML sort of snippet. Now, this is basic HTML. I can just change the title to maybe, I don't know, JavaScript. And this is what I'm going to use to explain on JavaScript. So in your HTML code, there are two places you can place JavaScript, depending on how you want it to behave. So one of the places is usually inside the head tag. So if you want your JavaScript to run before your page is loaded, or before like the contents of your page are displayed, then you have it on the head tag. But if you want your page to load and then your JavaScript to be sort of executed, then you have it before closing the body tag. So let me show you what I mean by that. You can just come here, add a script, and then just close it. And then you can have some basic JavaScript, like maybe console. Oh, there's supposed to be a small c, console dot log, and then maybe you can say something like JavaScript on the head tag, something like that. And then JavaScript. And then just before closing the body tag, let's have maybe a H1 or something inside. Maybe H1, close it, and then maybe you can say this is JavaScript. JavaScript. And then right before closing the body tag, we can have a script tag. So maybe I didn't mention this, but whenever you're having JavaScript, this is called inline JavaScript. It's not on a separate file, it's just inside HTML. And you just have a script tag, and then you can have your JavaScript inside there. So you can just copy this and then paste it over here. Then we can maybe say JavaScript in the body tag. So I don't know if you guys were taught how to use the live server, but basically, I don't know if I have live server to start with. Let me check. No, I don't have live server, so I have to install it. And after installing live server, I should be able to just run JavaScript stuff. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, I have the live server, it's installed because I can see this go live. So let me go back to my HTML. And then if I click on this go live, it should open the code for me in a browser. But I don't want it to open for me. So instead, I'll click on go live and then go back to the page that we had opened, this page, and just clear whatever I have in the logs, and then paste the address of this code. So let me show you what I just did. So I know when I click on live server, it opens port 55,000, 5500. So if I go here and then do 127.0.0.1 and then 5500, it should take me to that page. I mean, we type this is JavaScript, and then we can see the JavaScript logins and stuff over here. So you can see the JavaScript that was on the head. Now this gets printed before this is displayed, but it's too fast. We can't be able to see that. And then this gets printed after this is displayed. So this is the JavaScript that we have over here in the head, and this is the JavaScript that we have here before closing the body. Now, up to that point, do we have a question? Cool. Now that we have seen the two places we can place JavaScript inside HTML, let's also see how we can use JavaScript from a separate file. Now, it is possible to have JavaScript being loaded from a separate file. And for you to have JavaScript on a separate file, it always has to end with .js. So you see, for all HTML code, the files have to end with .html. For JavaScript, it has to end with a .js. So let's create a file here, and we can maybe call it sample or whatever you want to call it, and then end it with a .js. So that .js basically tells the browser and VS Code that this file is a JavaScript file. And then inside, we can just have a console .log. And then we can just say maybe JavaScript from separate, excuse me, something of that sort. Now, if we run our page, this JavaScript won't be executed simply because it hasn't been linked with the HTML. So if we went back to our what is that browser, in our browser, and then refresh, we won't be able to see that JavaScript doing anything simply because this index.html piece of code doesn't know how to sort of display this JS file. So for us to be able to display it, we have to link them both. And it's pretty simple. Again, we just use a script tag, like just the way we've been doing with the inline JavaScript. And then we add a very simple thing called source. Okay. So that's basically to tell HTML where like to find the respective file. So let me go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and just do that. So again, for this file as well, you can link it in those two places that we saw. So you can link it either inside the head or before closing the body tag. If you want this code to be executed before this is displayed, then you can just link it over here. If you want it to be executed after this has been displayed, then you can bring it over here. So let's go ahead and show how we can link it. The sort of syntax or the way of doing it is sort of similar to this other inline JavaScript. You just have a script tag, only that this time you change a few things. So instead of directly closing the script tag, so let me just separate it for us to see well. Instead of just directly closing the script tag, you add an src, which basically means source. And then inside of this speech marks, you add the location of your file. So in this case, the file is just over here. It's just sample.js. So we don't need to do much. You can just type sample.js. All right. It's sample.js, something of that sort. And then after that, you can specify the type. So you can say this is a text JavaScript, something like that. So this is just an extra instruction telling the browser that this is the file is containing JavaScript code. So by just doing this, this file now is or can be used or is being used by the HTML. So if we go back to our browser and refresh, we should be able to see it console log something over here. So you can see JavaScript from a separate file. And we can see it's the last one because it's executed after all these others. And we can change the location to the top to see it being executed before all the other code. So we take it to the top like that, and then we go back and refresh. And then you can see it's being executed the first, and then the others follow. So yeah, that is how you can link JavaScript to your HTML. So some trick or something I feel like I should show you that maybe other students have seen other students miss is the location. So whenever you're linking files in your project, always use something we call relative positioning. So don't worry about the terminology. Let me just show you what that means. Assume this sample.js was inside a folder, not just in parallel to the HTML. So let's create a folder and maybe you can call it JS. This is where we have our JS code, or you can call it whatever. You can call it assets. So let's move this inside there. Now, at this point, this script won't know where to find this file. So if we go back and refresh, it should probably give us some 404 error, or like it tells us like it's not able to find that file. All right. So you can see it's not able to find this sample.js. So it brings some error over here. Okay. And it gives us the specific error. I think it's 404 or something of that sort. So this is simply because this JS file is inside a folder. Now, for us to be able to show it over here, we basically just add the name of that folder. So JS / and now at this point, this line of code knows where to find that file. So if we go back and refresh the page, we can be able to see like it knows where to find that JavaScript file and it can display it. So I feel those are the core things that you need to know before you even get started with JavaScript. One last thing that I might also show you as a bonus is the fact that you can run JavaScript on your terminal. All right. So first of all, you have to make sure the location of your terminal or where your terminal is at is where that JavaScript file is at. So in this instance, our JavaScript file is inside this JS folder. So you have to move inside that JS folder. And the next thing that you always have to be sure about before doing this is the fact that you have to have Node.js installed. So you just go to where your file is at and then just do node and then the name of that JavaScript file. And you can see this sort of runs whatever is inside that sample.js file. So at this point, I think we've seen, I think four ways on how you can run JavaScript. One, using the console by just typing JavaScript directly. Two, using it inside your HTML by just wrapping it with script tags. Three, adding it from a separate JS file like this. And four, running it on your terminal using Node like that. So I think I'll stop at that and ask if anybody has a question. Anyone with a question at this point?